So why was it so good for so long? And then what happened? Because I like, maybe we should just talk about the market dynamics, because I don't totally understand it. But what happened? I mean, for a while it was like you could buy a house and you could go Airbnb and it was great, right? People were doing well.
Well, I think there's a few reasons for that. To Gabe's point, the pandemic, people were just wanting to travel. And I mean, I saw people buying quote unquote Airbnbs in like some not so sexy, suburban neighborhood. You're like, wow, that's not really a destination area, but it worked. People were booking it. They were charging these astronomical rates. And then there's a few reasons why I think it died. I think people either stopped traveling and stopped paying these outrageous rates. And so now they're not getting the rental income, or probably even more profound, like in our hometown, I live in Hood River, Oregon. Mitch lives close by, where people were coming, it's a resort town. They were coming in, buying up all these houses, overpaying for these houses because it was low interest rates and the cash flow was funding their lifestyle and it was working. But then our local town shut down all the Airbnbs. If you have a residentially zoned house, they're saying, nope, you can no longer make this an Airbnb rental. And now only commercially zoned properties can have that. So all these people that bought maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 houses that they were Airbnb making a killing, now they're just single family long-term rentals. And instead of charging $300 a night, maybe you're making $1,200 a month. And the fundamentals just kick the shit out of them.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a combination of both those things. I mean, domestic travel was up a lot during COVID, right? People weren't able to travel internationally. A lot of countries weren't allowing people into their country. So you had a lot of domestic travel. You had RV sales up. You had vehicle sales up. People were just traveling, right? The RV industry, both from the vehicles themselves, but also the campgrounds were filling up. There's just a lot of domestic traveling happening. I think that kind of peaked in 2022. Going off memory here, but I think like 2022, that was kind of a peak. And then same with Airbnbs. You had so much domestic travel and people were buying in all these non-destination places. And that worked for a while, right? They could buy any property almost anywhere, Airbnb it, and you had so many people traveling, they were paying a premium price to stay at these places. But I did, like I said at the top of the show, I mean, I personally know several people that bought these properties and said, hey, I'm going to run an Airbnb because I can make X amount of money more. And I'm like, that property doesn't pencil as a long-term investment. It's not a destination place. I know a guy locally that bought an $800,000 property and he's running numbers off of what Airbnb could potentially provide him. And I'm like, yeah, but as a long-term rental, you'd be paying this thing thousands of dollars a month if the Airbnb thing doesn't work out. I think there was just, in general, a lot of speculation in the Airbnb space, specifically in non-destination areas.
So the other thing too that I see, and I'm trying to wrap my brain around this, like there's all these different markets. So in a market where you bought a home and you go, look, I want to Airbnb this thing, but the city shuts you down. I mean, that's like worst case, right? You're like, oh my God, I now own this property. So it happened a lot. It happened a ton, especially smaller towns. There's like, dude, and they're killing. I mean, I believe in the free market, but also I do understand the argument where they're like, look, they're coming in, they're buying all these homes that cannot be inhabited by locals who feed the economy, who are here all year, who have kids in the school system. So like, I do understand there's an argument there. Now, if that was the case, you lose your Airbnb earning potential because the city shut you down. So that's a terrible situation. The other thing though, is if there's no regulation, is I think in certain areas, there was just a simple oversupply. So there was like big profits to be made. People rush in, they buy homes, they put them online. Maybe your first month in Airbnb and you're like, oh, it's me and 3 other people. By the next year, it's you and 50 other homes or more. And you have an oversupply situation where it just, even if travel stayed the same there, it just fundamentally doesn't make sense to charge those same rates as you were when there was an undersupply. So like it's created all these little sub markets and they're affected, yes, sometimes by the city leadership and ordinances, sometimes they're not. But when they're not, the oversupply, I think, has been insane because for a while the profits were big.
Well, keep in mind, it's not there's an oversupply of Airbnb rentals and maybe the demand stays the same or actually went down. And I'll get into that in a second. But people are asking, why do cities shut this down? Well, because they actually create an undersupply of long-term housing in these areas. And you're right, there's the firefighters, the police, the teachers, and they can't afford these houses anymore because people are driving up the values of these homes. And so the city government, who are elected by the constituents of that municipality come in and say, nope, we're going to shut that down. But also, like, even we have a small hotel that Mitch and I own. We have a nightly stay RV park. Those have taken a hit, down 30%. And the reason, because people had a lot of not only were they traveling domestically, maybe like you're talking, Gabe, and they couldn't travel internationally, but also people had a lot of disposable income. Like when the government was printing so much money and handing so much money out, I could spend $300 a night. I could go stay in Glendale, Arizona. No, nothing against Glendale, Arizona, but I don't think of it as a destination area. But people don't have the disposable income anymore. And then you couple that with inflation and people aren't traveling anymore. They're not staying in these places. So even if you have an Airbnb, or maybe you own a small boutique hotel or a nightly stay RV park that's a destination place, that still can be challenging because people's disposable income is gone and inflation is up, the cost of living is up. And so people aren't going to travel anymore.
Yeah, I agree. And I think government regulation is definitely part of it. A lot of these local governments have cracked down on, even allowing Airbnbs. But I also have heard that a lot of the big hotel operators also have been pushing to regulate this because it's interfering with their revenue model, right? And so you do have, I think, some pretty big players really pushing some of these local governments to not allow Airbnbs because, again, it takes away, their revenue stream because people are opting for Airbnbs versus the hotel. And I just think that like we used to book Airbnbs a lot more often, but I'm just finding great hotels. And again, this is just personal experience. I'm not backing this out by data, but we travel a lot specifically for my son's soccer. And it's just a lot more inexpensive to get a nice hotel. And we don't need a full Airbnb. Where Airbnb, in many years past, you get a reasonable Airbnb, and now it seems like prices are so high, and these operators need that price in order to make money. And to me personally, it's just not always worth it. If I'm going with a large group, sure, but when it's just like my family, oftentimes we don't need an Airbnb anymore.
So I got a question. I'll pivot this just a little bit, but you guys are capitalists. You guys are free market guys. We all are. What do you guys think about Airbnb regulation in these smaller towns? Say a town like where we live, where people come in and they go, look, we're going to buy as many homes as we can. We're going to put them on Airbnb and we're going to turn them into a little business. And it takes away from the firemen and the teachers and the local workers and the service workers and all those things. I mean, I'll be honest, I've wrestled with this concept because I'm sort of like, look, let the free market happen. It'll fix itself. Maybe the pendulum swings type thing. But like, what do you guys think? I mean, is it should the city come in and create ordinances against these guys?
I have mixed feelings in general, because I think about free market capitalism and I think about, this from time to time. Like there is a piece of me that just believes truly, purely in free market capitalism. And then the other side of me is like, yeah, but there needs to be some level of regulation. I haven't thought about it a lot in the Airbnb world, but I think about it with like health and wellness, right? Like, there's fast food restaurants. I think they're horrible. The ingredients are horrible. They're horrible for you. I think they're literally killing people. So free market capitalism would say, well, they're free to exist. They're allowed to exist. They can put whatever the fuck they want in their food. And then the other side of me, because health and wellness is so important to me and a big part of my journey, I'm like, how the fuck is that shit even legal, right? So I kind of struggle with that. I don't believe in like pure anarchy and no government regulation. I do believe in smaller government. I want people to succeed. I want individuals to succeed. I want the collective of people to succeed. And I believe in capitalism and I believe in some level of free market, but complete free market, then you have people putting crazy shit in water and in food and there's no regulation that all of a sudden you have unsafe Airbnbs and unsafe apartments. I don't know. I wrestle with it a little bit too, if I'm being honest.
But you also have democracy though, because democracy can vote against the free market and put regulations in place to give guardrails to the free market. So for example, if the town, I mean, it's kind of like, is the free market stronger than democracy or is democracy stronger than free market? Because if a town votes and the constituents say, look, we want no more Airbnbs, we want to limit this thing because it's destroying us, we all see that, and they vote and they get the majority vote, then shouldn't the town be able to put those guardrails up and actually interfere with the free market? I mean, maybe there's an argument there.
I think that's a great point. I mean, I've thought about it with just like, I'm a free speech absolutist, right? Like I believe that people should be able to say what they want and do what they want. And I've thought about this in terms of even like prejudice or, right? Like if you have somebody running a business, let's say they run a restaurant and they don't like a certain type of people, like more than likely that group of people are not going to be patrons of their business, right? So it's like government may jump in and say, hey, this is illegal, like, right? But I do think people have the ability to choose for themselves. So I kind of wrestle with it. Like if you're some asshole that owns a business or a property and you're saying, I don't want any of these types of people in my business. Well, guess what? You're probably going to have a lot of people not going to your business, not going to your property. Like, do you need regulation around that? Or will the people decide?
Especially in that example, you've got social media now. Somebody can go to a restaurant, they get turned away because of the color of their skin or something. They can get online and be like, don't go to Big Jim's. He's an asshole and he's a racist. He's a piece of shit. And going back to your initial question, Mitch, I do believe in capitalism. I generally shy away from government stepping in and manipulating supply and demand. I think that's counterintuitive to just how I'm built. However, though, I do agree there has to be some level of regulation. For example, I don't want Mitch in the front seat flying the 737 that I'm riding on to Houston. Right? That's like Mitch is a pilot. That's great. Good for Mitch. But I don't want him flying the 737 because Yeah. They pay him a minimum wage. He gets to fly 737, but then we all die. Or apartment buildings. I think that, we got to make sure there's, health and safety checks, all of that stuff. There's got to be some level. So I guess I wrestle with it too.
Well, you have to have controls to have a society. Like, it's like, oh, we have freedom, so I don't need to stop at stoplights or stop, like, is that freedom or is that dangerous? I mean, there's like, I think we all probably wrestle with this thing. When it comes to Airbnb, I think that towns have been really
we were talking about Airbnbs, weren't we? Thanks for
exactly.
Yeah.
I do think towns. I think towns, especially small towns, have been really effective. We've seen it locally. I think where I land on this is like, what I hate to see is when somebody risks their, resources and they go in and they buy an Airbnb, for example, right? Or a home, and they turn it into an Airbnb. And then all of a sudden they own title to that home. When they bought the home, it was legal and it was okay. And then they're shut down. I have a hard time with that. Versus the city saying, hey guys, we're pausing Airbnbs. Everybody else is grandfathered in who came in before that. That supply will slowly go down as people pivot and sell the home, whatever. Like, what I have a problem with it is when you buy land and you're allowed to do something and then all of a sudden you're not allowed to do that. That to me is sort of like crosses the line. What do you guys think of that?
Time, even not with Airbnbs. I mean, I've shared with you guys, I have one of my smaller mobile home parks, but it's on a lot of land.
Bring this example up. Yeah.
It's been a mobile home park forever. Now, once you take a home off, you're not allowed to bring more mobile homes in because the city doesn't want it to be a mobile home park. Ultimately, they can't say it can't be a mobile home park today. But as homes come off, you can't put a new one on. They're basically saying it can be a mobile home park for now, but if you ever want to do something different, it can't be. But I think we're talking about two different things when it comes to Airbnb. There's the side, there is the regulation side of like, I actually don't see a big problem with whether a property can be an Airbnb or not, right? Like, I mean, unless just these Airbnb guests are throwing crazy ragers every night, but there is some regulation and Airbnb rules around that. To me, it makes no difference, honestly, if a home's an Airbnb or not. The other side of that is the investor side. These are investors that are buying properties for Airbnbs that don't really fit the fundamentals of investing as anything other than an Airbnb. And that's, I think, two different things. From a regulation standpoint, I actually don't see a big deal whether it's a short-term, medium-term, long-term rental. But fundamentally, as buyer, as the investor, what is it that you're trying to get that real estate to do for you? And if it only works as an Airbnb, and then those regulations change, and that thing doesn't pencil as a long-term rental, you're kind of fucked.
Well, this goes off away from Airbnbs just for a second, but I see the hypocrisy in a lot of these towns too, and you're a prime example of this, Gabe, where cities talk about, we need more affordable housing. We need more affordable housing. We need more affordable housing. Mobile home parks, if they're well maintained with roads and you as a landlord, you take good care of these communities, it's like the best affordable housing option, right? Maybe you own the home. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. You're paying $400 a month lot rent. It's a good opportunity for someone to have home ownership and it'd be very affordable. But I see this over and over again. These towns we want affordable housing. We want affordable housing, but not in our backyard. right? And that's hypocrisy. We've seen it locally here too. We've seen cities shut down entire mobile home parks, displacing 50 plus families because they don't want that in our backyard, and it's unsightly. But at the same time, they're standing up at the podium. The mayor is talking about we need more affordable housing. Well, which do you want? And that shit bothers me.
I'm so tempted to call out this city, but I won't, because I have a little bit of class, and I'm still in conversations with them about what I want to do with this property. But yeah, there is a lot of hypocrisy around it. And when I brought up affordable housing, they wouldn't have the conversation. They're like, it's not about affordable housing.
Well, once you're ready, let's shame them, because I would love to talk about how a city, in this location does not support affordable housing. I'm a huge supporter of affordable housing. I think people need it. People are in all different economic positions, and what an ugly thing to not support.
Oh, I mean, Grant, we tore down the 3 ugliest homes there. They were abandoned homes that were packed from floor to ceiling with just stuff left behind. And, I paid a lot of money to have these 3 homes torn down and everything dumped. And, we had everything re-pedestaled and re-gravelled. And, some new tenants came in with like beautiful, RV, fifth wheels, like that's affordable housing. And the city said no RV camping. They signed 1-year leases. So I know we're kind of going off top, from the Airbnb, but it goes back to like the regulations. The city came knocking on their door saying you're not allowed to live here. And I say, like, look, we just had the 3 ugliest homes torn down, brought in great people, working class people that actually sold their home, bought a nice fifth wheel and want to live here. It looks 1,000 times better than it did before. And you're saying they can't just because of regulation, where it's actually a solution to affordable housing, and they wouldn't have that conversation. And I think it's the same thing with Airbnbs. I think, the city's not always willing to have the conversation that you want to have, and there's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of hoops and a lot of things behind the scenes that we probably don't see on the local government level.
Well, you talk about investing fundamentals, and we're not big, and we like long-term hold cash flow real estate. And again, I've always struggled with the Airbnb asset class for that reason. A, it's speculative, right? We don't know what's happening with these local governments and what they're going to do. But also, like, Airbnb is not really time freedom. Most people that I know that own Airbnbs, they're constantly responding to guests, and they need to go let them in, and then they're coordinating cleaning, and they're doing all of these types of things. And they also didn't do what we call stress test the downside, right? Whenever we buy a property, we're looking at what happens if 1/3 of our revenue goes away. What happens if half of our revenue goes away? Can we still cover our expenses and our debt service? Because when you're a sound fundamental investor in real estate, you need to stress test the downside. And these people were only looking at upside. They're looking at Airbnbs are going to continue capturing the rates they're getting. And they never thought, well, what if I have to turn this into a long-term hold? Same with flippers. Like I have a really good friend of mine who's a flipper, very conservative, does really well. And the question we always ask him is, if the market takes a shit overnight, which has happened in a lot of these towns, can you hold these flips as long-term rentals? And the answer was no. And at least he understands that. He has a large cash reserve. He knows you can offload these properties at a loss. Yes, it would suck, but he can actually survive another day and be successful. But if you're not stress testing the downside with any asset class, that's a problem.
Well, but also, you talk about long-term versus short-term investing and sort of that dynamic. Long-term investing is also based on long-term economics, data that goes back a number of years. And what I'm getting at is when people bought these Airbnbs in this last run-up, we'll say in the Airbnb market, it was cause and effect economics. The cause was we had this thing called COVID where they locked us all in our homes for a couple years or whatever that time frame was. That was the cause. That was input.
No one locked me up, Mitch.
I understand.
Gabe lives in a communist state, Oregon.
The idea, though, you understand what I'm saying, is millions of people are in their homes, they're isolated, they're not seeing people as much or whatever. There's this huge pent-up demand for what? For seeing people, for traveling, for experiencing things. So all of a sudden, anytime the pendulum swings left, it'll swing right, and it'll right set itself. So all of a sudden now RV parks are blowing up. We have all this traffic, Airbnbs, hotels, travel, cruises, all these things that people couldn't do a year prior, and it's based on cause and effect economics. Now, a ton of excitement got pushed into that effect zone, that area where they're experiencing the effect. We bought a RV park right inside the effect. of all of that stuff. But what did we do? We ignored all of it and underwrote from 2019 to what? 2015 or whatever, because we wanted to see what the long-term economics were, right, of that area. Now, what's happening, I think, honestly, is the effect of the COVID timeframe is dying off, but they bought inside it. They expected it to stay the same, and they underwrote based on the effect, not on long-term fundamentals. And if you look at the data, and I haven't, so I'm not going to say it's true, but I'd be willing to bet that every single town, unless there's some outliers, will go back to the exact same amount of travel to that town as prior to COVID. It'll always go back to that unless the town's blown up for other reasons, which there could be a couple of those, but basically it'll go back to right where it was. And so cause and effect economics is different than long-term economics.
Yeah, I think so as well. So I guess I'm curious, like if this is the true Airbnb bubble and the bubble has burst or it's bursting, what does that mean for investors? What does that mean for people that bought these properties I don't think I've said Airbnb right one time on this episode.
Urban.
Every time I try to say Airbnb.
That's right.
Way too many syllables for me.
It's too hard. Yeah.
It's hard, man. Investing in real estate is so much easier than talking.
It's so true.
so if this bubble has burst or is bursting, what happens to these Airbnb owners and these properties? Like, are they losing the properties? Are they feeding the properties? I mean, I personally know people, some of them have the means to feed these properties and pay the mortgage, but that can't be everybody, right? So what happens to these properties that are underwater? They paid too much and their debt service is way too high to cover as a long-term rental. What does that do to the market?
I was going to say, you don't have a lot of options. I mean, it's kind of like, okay, either you hold it and you rent it, maybe. So you could Airbnb it at a loss, you could rent it at a loss, or you could sell it, hopefully for what you paid for, or potentially at a loss, maybe a profit if you're super lucky, which is probably not the majority of folks. I think that we could see, we talked about the supply from baby boomers of homes coming to the market a couple videos ago. I think you could see the supply uptick as people offload these homes. Now, are they going, but that's also in parallel with a housing shortage. So are they going to eat shit on this thing? I'm not sure about that. I think it's dependent on the local market. I think it's totally market dependent.
Well, it's also like, what debt did they get? We know Airbnb owners that bought on hard money because the debt service was so relatively low compared to the income they were getting off these properties. And if they bought on a 5-year private note or a 3-year private note, and now interest rates are resetting, now their debt's going up to 12, 13%, whatever the case might be. That coupled with the fact people's disposable income has gone down, that coupled with the fact that maybe there's an oversupply of Airbnbs in that area, they can be put into a difficult position. But also, I mean, this is like the blood in the street analogy. Like if there's blood in the street, people are suffering. Maybe they have to offload these properties cheap. And maybe that's an opportunity for someone to then buy this property based on good fundamentals, long-term hold, cash flow, real estate, long-term rentals, and maybe they can do well. And unfortunately, I mean, that's why we always tell our elites in the 0 to 100 mastermind, buy on fundamentals, stress test the downside, don't buy on speculation, which I do feel like anytime there's a frenzy around speculative investing, whether it's building hotels in San Antonio, we have a guy that was doing that, or Airbnbs, or whatever the case might be, it's dangerous. And I think you could get yourself in a lot of trouble. Unfortunately for you, also fortunately for others, that might be an opportunity.
Yeah, and I don't want to paint with too broad of a brush. Look, I know people I know some folks that are killing in the Airbnb space, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're investing
they're all
in
going to
markets.
die. They're all going to die.
They're all going to die.
Yeah.
But they're investing in areas that they know, and they understand the numbers, and they understand the market, and they understand the regulations, right? And some of them have built big teams, and they've actually built an actual business around it, right? But I would say the majority of the people that I've seen, personally get into Airbnbs, it was on a lot of hope. It was on a lot of assumptions that Airbnbs were just going to get premium, nightly stays forever, no matter where it's located. I had this property where I let my property manager, she really wanted to do an old property manager, really wanted to do an Airbnb in one of the units. And I let her do it. And, the gross rent was much higher, but there's also a lot of costs running this little micro business, right? It's like we had to furnish the place. That was an upfront cost. We had cleaners that had to clean the place. There was a lot more turnover because they're not living there a year. They're living there for 1 or 2 days,
They're
right?
harder on properties, more maintenance.
Yeah, right. And so the gross income was much higher, but at the end of the year of letting her do that, the net profit was about the same. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just go back to a rental. And this was a non-destination type place. I live in a college town, so it did get some decent traffic. But like if I had to rely on the income from that as the Airbnb, it wouldn't have made sense. Even running basic math, the net result ended up being the same. And so I just put it back as a long-term rental.
Well, not to mention, what does Airbnb take? Like 20%? I mean, if you're using the platforms, they take a pretty hefty chunk.
Yeah, I can't remember what it is.
I think more than anything, though, like, yes, there are people killing an Airbnb. Gosh, I really can't say it. I'm not meant to own Airbnb.
Just say B&B.
B&B, I don't know.
Leave the air out. Yeah.
But regardless, like, yeah, there are people that are killing it in that space. I think more than anything, like any takeaway from this show at all, like just make sure you're running your numbers. Make sure that you really, truly know your market. And that's for anything, any asset class, whether you're buying short-term rental, long-term rental, medium-term rental, like know the numbers, know the demand of your market. You need to know the market. You need to know the sub-market because Airbnbs could work great in a lot of places and in other places, not so much. But again, it comes down to real estate fundamentals. Focus on cash flow, know your market, buy properties that make sense, and stay away from properties that only work in a market that's forever going up. And, you can't invest on hope.
Well, I'll say too, be careful about when there's massive inputs to the economy, be careful about taking, I'm not saying don't take action, but just be careful. Make sure that what you're underwriting is based on long-term fundamentals and not just the effect of that specific thing. So COVID was a massive input to our economy. It was massive. So is tariffs. So like make sure that it's not directly correlated and there's not a rush on something as a result of a temporary input, because that's a big problem.
Understand, like, I mean, we go through this exercise all the time. Like, ask yourself, what are all the things that could go wrong? Like, take an Airbnb, for example. Oh, no, this city has vowed to never put a moratorium on Airbnbs or shut Airbnbs down. What about the HOA you're in? I own a house in an HOA that shut Airbnbs down. It wasn't the local municipality. It was the HOA. It is everybody that got together. Or if you're buying, like you said, in an area that's reliant on one specific economy, like oil, like, what happens if that goes away? What happens if disposable income dries up? What happens if you're a developer and the cost of a 2x4 literally quadruples because of tariffs? Like, you need to ask yourself, what are all the things that can go wrong? And what are my contingency plans? And can I stress test the downside? And that goes with any asset class.
Well, I hate to say it, but at least my perspective is be a pessimist. Not necessarily like globally, but when you're looking
salty pessimist,
when you're looking at,
but it's good.
But when I look at a property, it's guilty until proven innocent for me, because I'm like, prove to me, and that's me proving, right? But like basically prove to me why this is worth investing in. And so, because the investment game can be dangerous, you can make decisions that affect you in the negative way as well. I mean, long term, if you can hold cash flow real estate, then you tend to win 99.9% of the time. But like, you've got to be careful and you've got to be sort of see the bigger picture and take some time to think. I know Gabe's a big proponent of this. Like, go think, man. Go for a walk. Think about things. Think about your decision. Look at the macro. Look where things are heading. Understand the dynamics. And for people who rush into Airbnb after COVID, I'm like, guys, did you have your head up at all? Did you understand that was a temporary wave? I mean, we knew it. You could very clearly see it. And I think a lot of people didn't see it or didn't think about it, didn't realize, hey, when you lock people in a house for a year, they want to get out, and that won't last forever in the same propensity.
And people were selling Airbnbs based on the last couple of years' numbers, right? And so,
right,
like, people were buying in 2023 based on peak Airbnbs. So they looked at short-term historical data going, oh my gosh, property's getting $1,000 a night. Yeah,
same with RV parks.
Yeah,
well, I was just going to say,
but not anymore, and not before that either.
Well, I was just going to say, Mitch was just about ready to jump in on this RV parks, because we bought a nightly stay RV park, but again, we underwrote it based on pre-COVID numbers. It's in our local resort area. We understand the competition. We understand a lot of the dynamics. We saw so many people buying RV parks based on like the last 2 years of fundamentals, high occupancy, high nightly rates. And almost like 99% of the deals across my desk now are like these RV parks. And these people are trying to offload these RV parks because revenue's down like 20, 30, 40%. And so, yeah, again, these are people that are buying based on the current fundamentals, the current economy, only looking back 2 years, and they're getting hit hard.
Yeah, guys, hey, I'd be curious, our listeners, if you stayed this long, you've listened to this whole episode, like I'm curious to your thoughts. Like drop it in the comments. If you're an Airbnb investor, I want to know, how are you winning? What are your challenges? Like what have you seen the last couple of years? Like I want to know your thoughts. None of us are Airbnb experts. So if you've gotten this far, drop some comments and we'll see you on the next one.